Grace and peace to you from the God who was and who is to come. Amen. Let me ask you a question. This is for me too, for all of us. What is the point of your life? How would you measure it? If I said, is your life successful? Is it what you think it's supposed to be? How would you know? By what measure would you look? And while we're thinking about that, let's take a run back to the 80s and listen to Peter Gabriel's song, Big Time. Remember that song? You remember the song, Big Time? Big Time, I'm on my way, I'm making it. All right, just a couple of us who were of that era. I love this song. And there's this great line. It really kind of, it's like, I'll be a big noise with all the big boys, so much stuff I'll own, and I'll pray to a big God as I kneel in a big church. Bigness, the sense of having abundance because we've earned it and we've claimed it. We drive bigger cars and live in bigger houses, and I have a bigger bank account, and I have more, and that's how we define success or greatness. This, at some level, is who we are, right? I mean, let's be honest. It's part of a cultural value. We want to get in that dollar machine and let the fans go and grab as many bucks as we can. And that becomes like a microcosm for our life. How much can I grab? How much can I take? What can I do to make sure that I have enough for me, not just for me, but for others? And I will define my success, the degree to which I'm a winner, by these three things. How much power do I have? Am I the top dog? Or prestige? Do people look at my life and say, I want to drive that car that person drives, or I want to live in that house? Or is it my privilege that people give deference to me? Becoming aware of privilege has been a very painful thing for those of us who've been living with it for a long time. It's hard for us to admit, I'm saying that as the poster boy for privilege. It's hard for us to see that I have a different experience, for example, in the world in general. I don't, like many of my sisters, I've never had to worry about walking home at night. I've never had that experience of what that means. Like many of my brothers and sisters who are people of color, I've never wondered about my safety when I've been pulled over by a police officer. In fact, truth be told, I've been mouthy. And I don't suspect that could go poorly for me. There are times in which this triumvirate of power and prestige and privilege have all blinded me to what it means to be human and to be successful. But I'm not the first, and I certainly won't be the last. I love this story today. James and John make their pitch. They are walking along with Jesus, and they ask for a blank check. I love how the whole thing starts. Teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask. Who asks that? Who asks that? Well, I'll tell you who does. Toddlers do that. Toddlers say, will you say yes to whatever I say? Right? That's a thing. And anyone who's a decent human, let alone parent, will never give that blank check back to that toddler. And Jesus doesn't either. Jesus doesn't say to James and John, you got it. What's up? He starts there. He says, tell me, what is it you want me to do? What is it you want me to do? And then they say, here's the thing. We want power and prestige and privilege. We think that you're an up-and-coming person. We can see the movement that's behind you. We want to sit at your right and left. We know that when you finally get rid of these Roman overlords, and when you're sitting on the throne and all the people are around you, there's going to be parades. There's going to be celebration. And when that happens, we want front row seats. So before the rest of these guys ask, we want right and left hand. And then they probably would have fought between the two of them on which one's right and which one's left. Jesus does this very loving thing. First of all, he tells them, he gives them a mulligan. All right? A mulligan in golf terms, you know what that means? Depending on who you're playing with, it means if you hit a shot and it's not the way you want to do it, you can just say, let's just do that one over again, pretend it didn't happen. And depending on who you're with, you either get to do that or get to do that one for each 9 holes. Figure it out yourself. The bottom line is, Jesus gives them a chance to have a do-over. He says, you don't know what you're asking. You don't know what you're asking. He said, in fact, here's what I want to tell you about what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? Now remember, Jesus has just told them about the cup he's going to drink. He says, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be captured, tortured, and killed. And on the 3rd day I'll rise again. You want some of that? That's the cup I'm going to drink. That's the baptism by which I'm going to be baptized. It says, are you able to do that? And they naively say, yep, we got this. And Jesus sees them like Icarus flying too close to the sun, knowing that that's going to cause them to have a great fall. And so he does something that God does to us a lot. He does not answer their prayer. He does not give them what they want. Back to the patron saint of country music, Garth Brooks, right? So I thank God for unanswered prayers. Sometimes God saying no to us is a blessing, because we don't know what we're asking for. We don't know what goes with it. By the way, just so you know, when God does answer your prayers, sometimes God answers those prayers in ways that you can't imagine. And I want to caution all of you to don't ever pray for patience. Really. I'm not kidding about this. I'm not fooling. Because when you pray for patience, what God does to give you patience is put someone obnoxious in your life that makes you learn patience. So if you want to have a nice and peaceful life, don't ask for patience. The way in which God sometimes teaches us and gives us the things we're asking for, maybe not the vehicle in which we wanted to do it. He says to them, you know what, here's the truth. You will actually go through what I'm going through, because we know that this is what happened to the disciples. They all were captured, they all were killed, and they all are raised to new life in Jesus Christ. But to be at my left and right hand side, that's not for mine to give. In Mark's gospel, there's a different definition of glory. James and John said, when you come into your glory, they thought that meant on the throne with all the perks that go with it. But in John's gospel, this is Jesus in glory, on the cross. And who's at his right and left-hand side? Thieves. People who never followed him, but for whom God's heart breaks. The outcasts, the despised, the people who've messed up their lives. This is whom God chooses to be at Jesus' right and left-hand side in glory. And when we ask sometimes for God to help us out in the midst of our drive for success, we have to stop for a minute and realize that sometimes what God's going to bring us into is going to be a painful chapter of our lives by which we will ultimately emerge transformed. Jesus' preferred company is the outcast, the despised, the people who are easily forgettable. This is his social set. This is his cup of tea. He doesn't spend much time or have much attention for the rich and the powerful. And so we ought to also pay attention to those motivations in our own heart. I think that the way in which we understand ourselves as Christians is that we should be downwardly mobile. We should be always looking for ways in which we could take the lower role and serve in more deep capacities. And the reason that I say that is because I think that we in our society have what I would call destination despair. That is this: what if you were able to achieve your destination, but when you get there you realize you don't want anything that you have? I see that a lot. Don't you? People who have maybe finally got the job, the income, the house, the car, and there they are, and they don't want any of it really. None of it really gives meaning. It's just shiny junk. And so it's a very hard place to be, and God gives us an antidote. So we're still in October, so I still get to talk about Brother Francis. You see, he was a person who was on this other trajectory. He was a privileged son of a cloth merchant. He was a troubadour who loved singing love songs to the women of Assisi. He was a bit of a playboy. He was living la vida loca, right? And in the midst of that, he realized he didn't want any of it. None of it was giving his life meaning. And so he began to divest himself. The word divest means to take off your vestments. He literally went to the center square, and this son of a cloth merchant took off all of his clothes and laid them down at the feet of the bishop. He said, I want none of it. In fact, I don't want the power, I don't want the prestige, I don't want the possessions, I don't want the privilege. And in doing that, he found his joy. He found his life, and he found his purpose. When he founded his order, and he had other people who also did this, they had very few rules, but they had one key rule. You have to get rid of everything. You have to get rid of everything. And when he started to run this order, they said, well, you're going to be our abbot, which is the word for father. You're going to be the head of this. And he said, no, 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 no. And so to this day, all Franciscans are in the OFM, Office of Friars Minores, which means the Order of the Little Brothers. We are all just little brothers. They see each other. And then the Poor Clares, who are followers of St. Clare, they come alongside, and they're seen as the Order of the Little Sisters. The idea being any sort of hierarchy is yet another trap. Any sort of possession is something that I have to defend with violence. Any sort of, even education, he said, could become something that I could become too proud of. But serving other people, serving people anonymously, serving people who can't pay me back, that's where I get my whole life. So when Jesus says, if you are going to be great, the only way to do that, the only path, is to find the way to serve in a significant way. If you will become the servant of all, you will become great. Father Damien of Molokai is a great example of that as well. He was living in Honolulu, and he was serving the wealthy people of that community. And then he increasingly was aware of this leper colony on Molokai, that they would take people over to this Kalapapa, this bay that's there on Molokai, and they would have them swim off the ships into shore, and they would bring, they even bring like supplies and throw them over. And all the people who were suffering from Hansen's disease would be living in that area in quarantine. They were not allowed legally to leave. And so Father Damien went there to serve them and found the meaning of his life. His writings are rich, and he did in fact contract leprosy, and this is the last picture of him before he died while being over there. But he found his life, he found his great joy, not by ascending to become archbishop, not by living in the larger manse that was part of Honolulu, but by living in a small shack with the lepers in Molokai. This is what it means to live our life to the fullest, to find those places where we can serve more fully, to say no to the demonic power of power, possessions, and privilege, to not define our life as success by winning, but success by serving and by loving. When we become the servant of all, we become totally free. As Luther said, God does not need our good works, but your neighbor does. And so may we serve one another in love, and by doing so, find our life. Amen. Our song of response